Hello, History 362. So I apologize. I've been delinquent in posting lectures. I will say simply this, that it's my belief that a good historian is very interested in his or her contemporary world, and that interest and attention has distracted me a bit this week. But we will still finish up with the Hellenistic world as we barrel towards our Thanksgiving break. And today I want to talk a little bit about Rome and Greece after the Third Macedonian War. So we left off, the Romans have defeated King Perseus, who is imprisoned and taken to Rome, where he dies in captivity. The Antigonid dynasty is no more. Macedonia, rather, is divided into four republics. And these republics, while they're allowed to do things like knit money, and a couple even are allowed to maintain small armies to defend that northern frontier, aren't allowed to have really any relationships with each other, including you're not allowed to marry somebody from another republic. That said, the Roman settlement in Greece and even the Eastern and Mediterranean after the Third Macedonian War is surprisingly harsh. In victory, Rome turns on many of its most traditional allies. And this fact alone is a bit puzzling, right? Why would Rome, all of a sudden display a sort of harshness or severity? And it turns out here is where sort of international relations may provide us with some perspectives. Because there is a phenomenon in international relations theory called hegemonic severity. And again, here I'm borrowing the application of IR theory to the ancient Mediterranean that is strongly associated with the scholarship of Arthur Eckstein. But hegemons, when they are establishing their hegemony we'll just define as sort of military dominance over a region, but when would-be hegemons are establishing their hegemony, they need their allies. They need all the help that they can get. And we've seen this in the case of Rome. Rome's desperately needed Greek allies, whether it's the Aetolian League and the First or Second Macedonian War, or the Achaeans in the Seleucid and Third Macedonian War, the Attalids throughout. Rome has heavily relied on Greek allies in the Eastern Mediterranean. And they've supplemented Rome's own, of course, very robust power. But the Romans, probably for both logistical reasons, and also they've got a lot of other places they're sending troops. They're sending troops to northern Italy. They're sending troops to Spain. They generally prefer to send relatively modest armies, about 20, 25,000 men, and then they rely on local Greek forces to plus them up. They rely on Greek specialists like archers and light infantry and cavalry. They've relied on the Rhodian navy. So the Romans, this is a long way of saying the Romans have needed allies. And now, suddenly, now that Perseus is gone, the Macedonian monarchy is defeated, the Seleucid dynasty is equally hamstrung, the Romans don't need their allies anymore. And this is where hegemonic severity comes in. When the hegemon, comfortably established, all of a sudden doesn't need to be nice to all the people who've helped it along its way. And so hegemonic severity refers to when the hegemon essentially kind of turns on all of its helpers and enablers. I would hazard that a lot of American foreign policy over the last 4 years in some ways represents a manifestation of hegemonic severity. Ironically, at a moment of potentially waning American power, but at least perceived hegemonic severity. So the Romans turn on their allies. Who do they turn on? Well, for one thing, they turn on the Achaeans. And now the Achaeans have served perfectly faithfully with the Romans, but there is some sense that there are some Achaeans who are less pro-Romans than others. And of course here, we also see internal dynamics with Achaea playing out. There are some Achaeans who are pro-Roman. They also have enemies within the Achaean League, and they now use this moment to say, hey, wouldn't it be great if Rome simply eliminated my enemies? And so the sort of pro-Roman faction convinces Rome that there is a anti-Roman faction. Polybius is really insistent that it's not an anti-Roman faction. It's simply people who want to live sort of with the degree of honorable independence from Rome, even if they are more than happy to cooperate with Rome. But nonetheless, a assize takes place, and 1,000 Achaean statesmen are arrested and deported to Italy, where they will be held as captives. One of them is Polybius. So this is how Polybius actually comes to Rome as a hostage. He is part of this kind of purge in Achaea of politicians who are seen as insufficiently pro-Roman after the Third Macedonian War. Even though Polybius he's as an officer in the Achaean League, he's served alongside Roman armies in the Third Macedonian War, and then ironically will go on to write the definitive history of Rome that allows me to basically tell you what I'm telling you today. So that's the Roman action against the Achaean League. Rome also then turns against Rhodes. And it seems the reason is almost kind of a slight. The Rhodians had offered to mediate between Perseus and Rome as hostilities are breaking out. And the Romans find this offer of mediation incredibly offensive. And they, again, it seems that they act like by offering to mediate differences, as if, Perseus and Rome are just two good faith parties, and the Rhodians are friends with both. This means that the Rhodians have, in effect, sort of taken Perseus' side, at least to the Roman eyes in this moment of hegemonic severity. And so the Rhodians are going to be punished. And the way that the Romans punish the Rhodians is they set up a free port at Delos. So Delos is a small island in the Cycladic Islands. The Romans actually then assigned Delos to Athens. But what that means is if you were a ship coming from Delos to Italy, you don't have to pay custom, at least certain types of custom dues. Whereas if you're coming from Rhodes to Italy, then you have to pay customs dues. So, of course, what does this do? It diverts a huge amount of shipping from Rhodes, which is, again, in the Eastern Mediterranean, a real kind of, commercial depot. It diverts a lot of that to Delos. And we know that Delos becomes a huge trading center because of this special kind of tax status that the Romans give it. And they give this status to Delos specifically to ruin Rhodes. And indeed, we're told that the Rhodians see their revenues drop by roughly 1 million drachmas a year. That's what they're losing. And of course, this means that the Rhodians now can no longer be that kind of independent city-state. The Rhodians are this unique city-state that has their powerful navy. And the reason they can afford that navy is because there's so much trade coming through. They collect the custom dues, and this allows them to not only be independent, but maintain this unusually large fleet. No more. The Rhodians are substantially reduced, and this also has an unintended impact. It seems that there is an explosion of piracy in the Mediterranean because the Rhodian fleet is no longer capable of suppressing piracy because the Romans have financially hamstrung Rhodes. So that's what the Romans do against Rhodes, again, up to now a mostly pretty loyal ally. They also consider replacing King Eumenes of Pergamon with his brother, Attalus. Indeed, there's going to be a sort of ongoing period of tension with the Romans and Eumenes, even though the Romans don't ultimately take the harsh actions that they contemplate don't manifest themselves. But there was strong suspicion amongst the Romans that Eumenes may have briefly entertained an alliance with Perseus, even though ultimately Eumenes provides troops, and those troops are along with the Roman army at the Battle of Pydna. Again, here we have Roman hegemonic severity towards traditional allies. We also have a shocking act in 168, right after the Battle of Pydna, in that the Roman Senate orders Paulus to punish Epirote cities, communities in Epirus, that had been seen as either siding with Perseus or being too pro-Macedonian. And they are to be punished by simply being sacked and their populations enslaved. So on a set day, the Roman army kind of deploys into Epirus, and then all of a sudden Roman units pounce on different cities, simply rounding up everybody in Epirus and taking them captive and then selling them into slave markets. And we're told that 150,000 people in Epirus are enslaved in a single day. And this seems to turn large swaths of Epirus, at least temporarily, into a depopulated wasteland. Now, this is one of the largest mass enslavements that we have attested in the ancient world. And again, it is a rather shocking act of severity for a people that have come and spoken the language of liberation, spoken of freedom for the Greeks. All of a sudden, they are reducing a huge swath of, the Epirites are kind of Greek adjacent, but are reducing them to pure unadulterated slavery. So these are this is the Roman severity after the Third Macedonian War. And yet, the same thing happens. The Romans, after inflicting all of this harm, leave. There had been some, it seems that it had been briefly contemplated provincializing Macedonia. But we actually have a speech, or a fragment of a speech by Cato the Elder, that is something along the lines of, the Macedonians have to be free because we cannot protect them. And supposedly Hadrian, many years later, will use this quote to justify withdrawing Roman armies from Mesopotamia, from Iraq, actually, after an invasion by Trajan is seen as a step too far. So the Romans are not going to maintain forces in Macedonia. They're not going to provide help with the defense of Macedonia and Greece from those barbarians. That's why the Macedonian republics are still allowed to maintain armies. They are pulling out again altogether, albeit, again, having first kind of ruined everybody's day, and are now returning back to Italy. Again, this I think may lead to, again, kind of some confusion that there is all of this harm inflicted by Rome, and yet Rome all of a sudden is now no longer going to be involved on a day-to-day basis in the Hellenistic East. Although certainly we're going to continue to see Roman diplomacy, some of it somewhat aggressive. But again, we sort of have this another kind of odd pause or lull after the Third Macedonian War. The Romans again kind of lose interest in the Greek East, at least in terms of active military engagement. Now, in 150, in or around 150 BC, the exact month is unclear, a pretender arises in Macedonia, a pseudo-Philip, whose name is supposedly Andriscus. And he claims to be the son of Perseus. And while a pretender, there clearly is a deep hunger in Macedonia for the Antigonid dynasty that still is seen by many, even roughly a generation later, as the kind of fundamental form of rule in Macedonia. So this achieves a following. The pseudo-Philip succeeds in defeating some of the initial Roman military forces that are sent. Usually 2 small military forces are sent. And so finally in 148, the Romans send Caecilius, the future Caecilius Metellus Macedonicus, who defeats pseudo-Philip supposedly not far from Pydna, another battle at or around Pydna, and therefore crushes this rebellion. And now a decision is made in 148 that Macedonia is no longer going to be for independent republics, but rather it is going to be annexed as a permanent province of the Roman people. And this makes Macedonia the first permanent province that the Romans now have in the East, where they will yearly send out an administrator and military forces. Now, while the Romans are in Macedonia, in 146, a dispute breaks out between Rome and the Achaean League. And here again, the Achaeans, who admittedly, a number of them had been harshly punished in 167 by being deported, and are still there. Polybius is still with his fellow prisoners who haven't died of old age, are still in Greece. Sorry, are still in Italy. But the Achaean League, here there is, to just sort of look backwards, the Achaean League, since the Second Macedonian War, has become very, has been focused on securing control over the Peloponnese, especially Sparta. And indeed, prior to Polybius's day, the great Achaean commander Philopoemen had finally succeeded in defeating Sparta and annexing it into the Achaean League. Now that said, the Spartan connection to the Achaean League is always shaky, and just before 146, the Spartans are seeking to basically secede from the League. And the Achaeans are trying to stop them, and the Spartans are calling on Rome diplomatically. And we know that there are diplomatic engagements that are imperfectly described by Polybius, but see Roman and Spartan envoys engaging with the Achaeans. Now, here's the thing. The Romans, it seems, for a very long time, have tried to prevent the Achaeans from being overly harsh to the Spartans. And it seems the Achaeans have mostly been able to just ignore them because, for the most part, Rome isn't there. The Romans can say, tis, 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 be nice to Sparta, but there's no Roman army or Roman governor in Greece because the Romans do not have any kind of permanent presence. And this may be where this kind of tragic misunderstanding, if you're an Achaean anyway, comes about in 146. The Achaeans seem to think that while Rome is coming down very forcibly on the side of Sparta, they're still free to just kind of ignore this. It may be because they assume that between the Third Punic War that is still raging in Africa and requires a lot of Roman military manpower, and the fact that the Romans are still busy kind of with forces up in Macedonia, they just aren't going to take action against the Achaeans. And here, Achaean leaders tragically misconstrue the situation. Because the Romans see this diplomatic defiance as a cause of war, and they then very quickly move the forces that they have from Macedonia down towards Greece. Initially, Caecilius Metellus Macedonicus pushes the Achaeans back towards the Peloponnese. At this point, there is a routine change of commander. So the new commander is Lucius Mummius, and Mummius defeats the Achaean army that has taken up basically a blocking position on the isthmus, scatters it in what seems to be a pretty handy Roman victory, although we don't have a great description of it. And then he captures and sacks the city of Corinth. Now, for those of you who are in History 363, Carthage has just fallen. Scipio Aemilianus, Polybius's good friend, has just captured and sacked the city, which he razes to the ground and will leave it a wasteland for the next century. Polybius is there with Scipio Aemilianus at Carthage as an eyewitness. And that being said, the Roman aristocracy is profoundly competitive. So one Roman has just succeeded in defeating and razing a great city to the ground. And it seems that Mummius, who, the Romans routinely have captured cities and haven't felt the need to obliterate them. But Mummius here feels the kind of peer pressure to do the same. And so he also sacks Corinth, strips it of centuries upon centuries of artwork, which he sends back to Rome. And then the city is destroyed. All the inhabitants who have been captured in the sack are enslaved. And it also will be a wasteland for another century. This is a shock. This is kind of like the Alexander's destruction of Thebes, which at the very start of the course, this is truly shocking. And of course, one difference is Thebes had been relatively briskly resettled by 318. I think there is Thebes has been refounded by Cassander. Not so with Corinth. It will be this empty spot, reminding everyone of Roman power for over 100 years. So again, another kind of example of Roman severity as the Achaeans, who's again are, let's just say, foolish for the way that they let this kind of create this crisis and then let it get out of hand, but they pay very dearly for it. All right, so enough grim news for the Greeks. Next time we'll think a little bit about Pergamon, the Hellenistic kingdom, and how it ultimately also becomes a province of the Roman Empire.